Hi again, everyone. Mark Rogers TV looking to fill your fix for college football during a long off season, especially this big gap between the BCS National Championship game and spring football. And we do it with unit rankings, ranking the top 10 returning players at each position going into 2013. We hit you up with the quarterbacks. Now we go to the backfield and the running backs. Keep in mind, not only is there a lot of talent moving on to the NFL overall, but 11 underclassmen who could have played college football this fall, 11 underclassmen running backs going to the NFL draft in late April. That includes who we consider the best running back in the country, Alabama's Eddie Lacy, a complete monster. Also, Michigan State's Le'Veon Bell, one of the best backs in the country and a complete workhorse, ran it 350 times last season, and South Carolina's Marcus Lattimore. He's got tons of talent, and when he was on the field, spectacular. But of course, weighing in his decision, two major injuries at South Carolina, so he thinks it's time to move on to the NFL. So we hit you with our top 10. Keep in mind that down below me, in the description portion of the YouTube video post, we've got our honorable mention players as well. So, how good is Alabama? They lose the best running back in the country, and they replace him with the best running back in the country, TJ Yeldon. He ran for 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns, and he stepped up in the huge games. Okay, remember that top 10 showdown with Michigan to start the season? It turned out to be a joke, but that was TJ Yeldon's first game, big time, neutral site against Michigan. He ran for 111 against the Wolverines. 153 as Bama took over the championship game against Georgia to win the SEC and to move on to the BCS. He ran for $108 against Notre Dame. But TJ Yeldon's biggest play of the year wasn't a carry. It was a pass completion from A.J. McCarron, the one that he caught the swing pass out of the backfield to the left side, ran for the touchdown to defeat LSU in Baton Rouge. Otherwise, Bama doesn't make the championship game. All right, number 2 is Kadeem Carey, probably a guy that you, unlike the Alabama guys, don't get to see much, especially on the East Coast. Arizona's Kadeem Carey, eye-popping numbers. Almost 2,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, 36 pass catches. I caught this guy against Nevada in the bowl game as the Wildcats made an improbable comeback, almost impossible comeback late in that game, and Carey ran it for 172 and 3 touchdowns against Nevada. Earlier in the season, the eye-popping stat, if you check out the game logs, 366 against Colorado. Of course, we keep in mind that the Buffs barely have an FBS caliber defense. The game that really stands out, though, 132 for Kadeem Carey against Stanford's front seven. He's a good one. All right, Todd Gurley at number 3. As a freshman in the SEC at Georgia, he ran for 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. He ran for big yardage against the big boys, against Nebraska in the bowl game for 125, against a great Florida defense. He ran for $118, did Todd Gurley, as Georgia won that huge game that got them to the SEC championship game, and against the Alabama Crimson Tide, 122 in the SEC championship game and 2 touchdowns out of a freshman who shared time in the backfield with Keith Marshall. At number 4, Lache Seastrunk. Okay, we love the name because it reminds us of the old Oakland defensive lineman Otis Seastrunk, bald head. Lache Seastrunk of Baylor. He got on the map more for his mouth than his legs. He had a great season, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. But what he really did was put it in overdrive down the stretch. He got some opportunities after not carrying the ball much early. He just had 29 attempts in the first 7 games. He ran it for $185 against Kansas State. Then he hit up Texas Tech for 136, Oklahoma State for 178, and then 128 on just 16 carries in the bowl game against UCLA. Lache Seastrunk, going into the Holiday Bowl against UCLA, said, "I'm going to win the Heisman next year." Then he said, I think I'm going to win the Heisman. Then he said he hopes he's going to win the Heisman, which I would expect a lot of players hope to win the Heisman. But he backed it up with 1,000 yards in those huge games we talked about down the stretch at Baylor. Number 5 is Ohio State's Carlos Hyde. Not huge numbers. 1,000 yards, just under 1,000 yards, 16 touchdowns rushing. He did miss 2.5 games. And of course, Braxton Miller was doing much of his work early in the season, first 3 quarters of the season for Ohio State. Now, when Braxton Miller got bottled up late in the season, defenses focused on Miller's running ability. Carlos Hyde stepped up, 140 against Michigan, 100 plus against Wisconsin, had big games down the stretch, ran it for 16 touchdowns. Not great speed, good burst, but man, on 3rd and short, this guy will not be denied. Now, our 6 through 10 players, we go to Storm Woods out of Oregon State. Ran for just about 1,000 yards, sharing carries there. About 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. His big game was in the Alamo Bowl against Texas, so he finished strong, did Storm Woods, with a $118 against the Longhorns. And he did some serious work out of the backfield, though, as well as a freshman with 38 receptions. At number 7, Jeremy Hill out of LSU. The rushing numbers not going to explode on you, 755 rushing, but you know LSU football. They run by committee. They had Ford, they had Ware, they had Hilliard. Some of those guys moving on to the NFL. Jeremy Hill, when it counted, he got the carries. That tells us all sorts of stuff. Not against the lesser teams, but against the big teams. Jeremy Hill, as a freshman in the SEC, much like Todd Gurley, ran it well against big-time competition. Just 13 attempts in his first 6 games, and then he ran for 100-plus against Alabama, Texas A&M, South Carolina, and also against Clemson in the Chick-fil-A Bowl with minimal carries. Look out for Jeremy Hill and his 12 touchdowns from 2012. Venrick Mark of Northwestern, as the Wildcats burst onto the scene, surprised the Big Ten, almost won the conference, won a bowl game for the first time in forever, 1949. Venrick Mark of Northwestern, with little support from the passing game, ran for 1,300, ran for 13 touchdowns, and ran for 100-plus against some of the best defenses in the Big Ten. Michigan State, one of the best in the country. Michigan, he also ran for 100-plus against some other top defenses like Michigan, as we mentioned, and Vanderbilt. Okay, we've got at number 9, Kenneth Dixon, Louisiana Tech, ran for 1,027 touchdowns. Of course, the pass game is huge at Louisiana Tech, but he supported it, complemented things in the air with the great ground effort, and he had a big game against Texas A&M. We know Texas A&M and what they did, not just on offense, but defense last year. Very fast, very physical, and he ran for 100-plus, 119 against Texas A&M, and had a big game against a very strong Utah State team as well, with about 100 yards rushing as a freshman. All right, at number 10, to wrap up the top 10, we go to Nebraska and Amir Abdullah. Okay, Rex Burkhead was the guy. He went down. Abdullah stepped in with 100-plus yard games consecutively against some of the best defenses in the Big Ten. Against Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Penn State, Abdullah ran for just about 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, and he will be the guy that Nebraska counts on in 2013 to win a Big Ten championship. That's our top 10 running backs. Again, we have the honorable mention guys down in the description center. Let us know where we missed it, who we should move up, move down, move in, or move out. The top running backs in the country, right here on Mark Rogers TV.